The sun was just beginning to set over the small suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. Evelyn and Harold Thompson, an elderly black couple in their late 70s, were sitting on their front porch as they did every evening. After 48 years of marriage, they had made a ritual out of sipping sweet tea and watching the world slow down. "Remember when this street used to be nothing but dirt and pine trees?" Harold chuckled, his weathered hand resting over Evelyn's. She replied with a smile. Back before folks forgot what neighborly meant. Their laughter was cut short by the screech of tires on asphalt. A police cruiser rolled slowly to a stop in front of their house. Two white officers stepped out, their hands already resting on their belts as if trouble was brewing where there was none. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "Evenin'," Harold said calmly, though his voice carried the weight of decades of experience. "Something we can help you with, officers?" The taller one, Officer Blake, eyed the Thompsons like they were suspects in their own yard. "We got a call about suspicious activity in the area," he said, his tone sharp. "Mind telling us what you're doing out here?" Evelyn blinked in disbelief. "On our own porch?" "Ma'am, just answer the question," the second officer, Simmons, added, stepping closer. His hand brushed his holster, not in fear but in habit. Harold kept his composure, though anger simmered beneath his calm exterior. "We live here. Have for 35 years. Is sitting on my porch a crime now?" Blake smirked. "Just making sure everything's on the up and up. You wouldn't mind showing some ID, would you?" Evelyn's voice cracked, equal parts fear and fury. "You're asking a 77-year-old man for ID to sit on his own porch?" The street had grown quiet, the usual hum of crickets replaced by the hum of tension. A few blinds from neighboring houses shifted. Maplewood had seen this scene play out before. Harold reached for his wallet slowly, his movements deliberate. "You boys ought to be ashamed of yourselves," he muttered. "Ain't no crime here except the one you're making." Before he could hand over his ID, Officer Simmons stepped forward, his shadow falling over the elderly couple. "Step off the porch, sir." Evelyn's heart pounded. "He's not going anywhere." "You have no right." Blake cut her off. "Ma'am, we can make this easy or we can make this hard." Harold's eyes met Evelyn's, a silent conversation passing between them. They had lived through segregation, marched for civil rights, and raised a son who had gone on to serve his country. They had survived worse than this, but something in the officer's eyes told them the night wasn't going to end peacefully. And that's when the sound of a roaring motorcycle broke the tension. The Thompsons both turned their heads toward the corner of the street. A figure in Marine Corps fatigues was speeding up the block, dust kicking behind the wheels. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "Oh Lord, it's Marcus," she whispered. Their son had come home. And he wasn't smiling. The motorcycle screeched to a halt in front of the house, gravel spitting from under its tires. Marcus Thompson swung his leg over the bike and pulled off his helmet. His sharp, commanding presence filled the air before he even said a word. Years of serving in the Marine Corps had etched authority into his posture, his voice, his very being. "What's going on here?" Marcus asked, his tone calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. The officers turned to face him. Blake's hand flexed near his holster again, while Simmons raised his chin as if asserting dominance. "Sir, this is a police matter. Stay back." Marcus stepped forward without hesitation, his boots hitting the pavement like drumbeats. "That's my mother and father. And you're standing on their porch. Explain yourself." Harold exhaled deeply, relief and fear wrestling inside him. "Son, they say we look suspicious, sitting on our own porch." Marcus's eyes, dark and unwavering, shifted between the two officers. "Suspicious?" His voice cut through the evening air like a blade. "These are two 70-year-old black elders who've lived here longer than you've been alive. You better have a good reason to be here harassing them." Blake's jaw tightened. "We received a call about Marcus held up a hand, and somehow, the officer stopped mid-sentence. Don't lie to me. I've spent 15 years reading men like you. That radio call never happened, did it? Simmons shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner. We're just doing our job. Marcus's stance widened slightly. Every muscle in his body radiated discipline, the kind that comes from boot camps and battlefields. Your job isn't intimidation. It isn't terrorizing old folks who've done nothing but live their lives. Your job is to serve and protect. And right now, you're failing both. Evelyn stood, her voice breaking as she tried to calm the storm. Marcus, please. But Marcus didn't look away from the officers. No, Mama. Enough is enough. His voice lowered, steady and cold. You ever point a gun at a 12-year-old kid in Afghanistan and watch his hands shake because he was scared? I have. And you know what? I treated that boy with more respect than you're giving my parents right now. The street was silent. Even the neighbors who had been peeking through blinds were now holding their breath. Blake cleared his throat. Look, we can just wrap this up. No harm done. Marcus stepped onto the porch, placing himself between his parents and the cops. No harm done. My mother's shaking. My father's blood pressure is probably through the roof. You think you can walk away and call that no harm? He reached into his jacket slowly, pulling out his military ID. He held it out, not as proof of authority, but as a reminder. Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson. Marine Corps. I've bled for this country so my parents can sit on this porch without fear. You're going to walk back to that cruiser and you're going to think real hard about what you just did. Simmons swallowed hard. Blake looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's unflinching stare made his words die in his throat. They stepped back toward the car, the tension breaking only slightly as the engine started. As the cruiser rolled away, Marcus turned to his parents. Evelyn's hands were trembling as she reached for his arm. You always come when we need you, she whispered. Marcus's jaw clenched as he looked down the street, his voice heavy with something more than anger. I shouldn't have to, Mama. Not for this. Not here. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. The battle wasn't just on foreign soil. Tonight had proved it lived right here at home. The porch was quiet except for the soft hum of the night. Marcus stood like a sentry, his eyes still fixed on the street where the police cruiser had disappeared. Harold leaned back into his chair with a sigh, though his hands trembled slightly as he reached for Evelyn's. You okay, old man? Marcus asked, his voice softer now but carrying the same weight. Harold managed a chuckle, though it was thin and tired. Son, I've been okay through worse. But I'll tell you what, that fear. It don't get easier. Not even at 77. Evelyn wiped a tear from her cheek. All these years. All the marches, the prayers, the votes, and still, we can't sit on our porch without proving we belong here. Marcus crouched down in front of them, resting his hands on his knees. For the first time that evening, his voice cracked. You do belong here. You always have. And I swear to God, as long as I'm breathing, nobody's going to make you feel otherwise. Evelyn reached out and cupped his face, her thumb brushing against the scar near his jawline, the one he brought home from his second deployment. You fought enough battles, Marcus. He held her hand against his cheek. Mama, some battles you don't get to choose. The sound of footsteps on gravel made them all turn. It was their neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, clutching her cardigan around her shoulders. I saw everything, she said softly. Those officers had no business here. I got it all on my phone. Marcus stood and exhaled slowly. Thank you, ma'am. That might matter. Harold looked up at his son, a shadow of worry in his eyes. You think they'll come back? Try something else. Marcus's gaze was hard, but his voice was gentle. They might. But so will I. That night, as the Thompsons locked their doors, Marcus sat on the porch alone, his motorcycle parked like a guardian at the curb. The moonlight painted silver streaks across his uniform as he listened to the distant sirens of the city. He had faced insurgents in deserts thousands of miles away, stared down death in places most Americans would never see. But nothing felt as personal as this fight, this porch, this house, his parents. Inside, Evelyn lay awake, listening to the soft murmur of Marcus's boots on the wood outside. Harold reached over and squeezed her hand. "He's still our boy," Harold whispered. "No," Evelyn said, tears slipping silently onto her pillow. "He's a man who shouldn't have to protect us from the people who are supposed to protect us." Out on the porch, Marcus looked out at Maplewood, his jaw set. He wasn't just a Marine anymore. He was a son on the front lines of a different kind of war, the one fought not with rifles and grenades, but with dignity, fear, and the unshakable demand to be seen as human. And as the first hint of dawn began to rise, he made himself a silent promise. This fight isn't over. Not until no one's parents have to live in fear on their own porch again.